Since childhood, I had dreamed of a family. I imagined a loving and supportive wife, wonderful children, and a happy life. But just when I thought my dreams were about to come true, everything collapsed. My wife suddenly decided that she needed a little more time before starting a family. Jim Dees, a baseball analyst for the Chicago Cubs, never ceases to amuse me. One Saturday afternoon, I was watching my favorite Cubs play against the Cincinnati Reds on Marquee Sports. Dees was distracted from the game at the historic Wrigley Field Stadium, known for his impressive career with the Houston Astros. I couldn't help but admire the cute kid in the stands, and this moment became a kind of calling card for him. Like many others, I was looking forward to the moment when Dees would notice a young fan in the crowd. The excitement increased when the Cubs won 7-2 in the fifth inning, and the Reds changed pitchers. At that moment, my wife of 6 years entered the room with a beer for me and a glass of wine for herself. I couldn't help but turn my attention from the game to my wife. "I'm sorry, dear, but seeing my wife in tight short denim shorts and a tight top was much more interesting for me," I said. "Enjoying your childhood time, huh?" My wife teased me, looking at the big screen. "Yes, but nothing beats quality time spent with my wife," I replied, making her blush as she settled down next to me on the couch. I couldn't help but admire her as she sat there. "You guys are just so predictable," she giggled, puffing out her chest slightly and shrugging her shoulders. We sat in silence watching the Cubs score 2 more goals until Vivian decided it was time to chat during the commercial break. Vivian was happy to suggest going to Chicago next weekend to start preparing for the birth of a child with fun. She suggested I go to the Cubs game while she went shopping or something. I caught Vivian's hint and gave her a sidelong glance. Innocently, I joked, "Are you sure you don't want to come to the game with me? Maybe I'm contagious or something." I felt her body press against mine. "I was thinking maybe we could both take some time to ourselves this weekend before diving into all the wedding celebrations and officially becoming a family," she suggested, giving me her captivating smile and shining blue eyes. She knew it was difficult for me to refuse her, especially when she used that charming smile. It's a tactic she's been using on me for the last 8 years since we got married. But at that moment, something about her offer didn't seem right to me. I didn't fully accept her idea, but I didn't reject it either. "Of course we can come up with something. Let's go to Chicago," I said without much enthusiasm. "We can both take a day off on Friday and go there on Thursday evening." Vivian seemed delighted with the plan. "I'll arrange everything, trust me," she said impatiently. The thought of our trip didn't leave my mind until late Friday night in our hotel room when I turned on the TV to watch ESPN. By that time, we had already had lunch at a local diner and visited the Shed Aquarium. I asked Vivian, thinking about my evening attire. There was silence before she answered, and I noticed a shiver run through her body. "Well, for you, today is the Cubs game against the St. Louis Cardinals. You'll be sitting right behind the Cubs dugout at third base, where you can enjoy food and drinks," she explained. "As for me, I plan to have dinner, then drink and dance. I'll be at one of the high-class clubs in the city. I don't know when I'll be back, and I probably won't be free on Saturday when we get home. Sunday evening, we can have an intimate night without any obligations and start our journey towards starting a family." "Wait, are you serious? I can't let you go to Chicago alone for 2 nights and a day. What about our relationship? What about the promises we made to each other?" I exclaimed. Vivian looked at me as if I needed to explain everything slowly, which was probably true. We always talked about having children as soon as we turned 30, even before the wedding. "Remember," she concluded. "But I came to the conclusion that since most of the work will be on me, I deserve this, a small reward for it." "A reward? Are you serious?" "I don't recall the reward clause in our wedding vows," I grimaced in displeasure. "You may not be experiencing the physical changes and sacrifices associated with carrying a child for 9 months or postponing your career for the sake of raising a child, but I am. I'm the one who works hard to support our family and misses such important moments as a child's first word. Shouldn't that mean something?" I asked, my tone bordering on pleading. She dismissed my concerns as unimportant. "We've been together for 8 years, Q. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt my love or loyalty?" she asked. "No," I replied. "But I want something for myself. A bonus. A weekend romance. Not love, just a desire for a day and a half. After that, we can forget about the birth control pills, and it'll just be you and me forever. But all I hear is me, me, me. I snapped. They say there's no me in team, but there's no me in us either if you do that. We won't be us anymore. Are you saying that you and I will stay together forever if I agree to this? What happens if we decide to have another child? Will the situation be the same? In any case, it won't happen soon. Do you see the scar from the surgery on my forehead? I asked. I didn't ask for your consent, Q. I don't need it, she stressed. I just told you about our plans. I'm quite capable of making decisions about my body. It won't change our relationship. If you drop your ego, it's not about my ego, baby. Before I think about my ego, I need to deal with your extreme selfishness, I snapped. Maybe I should find the same kind of entertainment as yours. Her expression changed, the superiority she had shown a few minutes ago disappeared, and she began to look insecure. You take the car, and I'll take an Uber to get to my destination, she said, seeming to realize that I'm not the kind of guy she assumed. Disappointed, I shook my head and, grabbing my keys and phone, left the room without looking back. I could almost hear her suggesting that I go to the baseball game as a loyal but soon-to-be devoted partner. Instead of watching the Cubs game live, I decided to listen to the radio while driving home. Pat Hughes and the rest of the team did a great job, and the Cubs won another victory. I didn't have a specific plan except that I needed to be with Vivian. It's a shame when your idea of a person is radically at odds with the truth. Vivian Langer was working as an operator at my bank when I came to get my first salary at the National Transportation Company where I recently started working. She had worked at the bank for only a few weeks, having recently graduated in finance. While I was standing in line, I noticed a petite blonde with green eyes and what seemed to be a full bust under a stylish blouse. She chatted casually with customers and quickly processed their transactions until it was my turn at her booth. Your employer can arrange a direct transfer of your salary so that you don't have to queue every Friday, she said with a wide grin. I already knew about this possibility because the HR director had told me about it when I applied for the job. But personally, I preferred the traditional way of getting my salary in hand. As a child, I spent summers working for my father, and at that time, electronic transactions were unavailable. That's why I'm used to cashing checks in person. It's convenient for me, and it also gives me an excuse to visit you, I replied. Her cheeks flushed with a charming blush, and her smile shone with warmth. While she was anxiously biting her lower lip, I couldn't help but notice a spark of mutual attraction between us. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to always stand in line at Vivian's cashier's window, even if it took a little longer to do so. Despite the attempts of another cashier to lure me to her place, I politely refused and went to Vivian, who kindly accepted my choice. Although I pride myself on my calmness and rationality, I must admit that I feel at ease and confident in the presence of women. A week later, I plucked up the courage and finally asked Vivian out on a date, to which she agreed. I soon discovered that Vivian is not only sociable and intelligent but also comes from a wealthy family that continues to provide for her in a certain way. After meeting her parents, I learned that her father, a well-known lawyer in our city, is strongly attached to his only daughter. It became clear that Vivian was used to getting her way thanks to her father's wealth and connections. As Vivian and I moved up the career ladder at Bishop Enterprises, we found satisfaction in our achievements, much to the delight of her parents. John Langer, Vivian's father, emphasized the importance of maintaining the lifestyle Vivian was used to. He made it clear that treating his daughter with respect and fulfilling my responsibilities toward her would allow me to take my rightful place in their family. But he warned that mistreating her or harming her would be unacceptable. Be careful. If you cross my path, you'll have an enemy for life, John warned me. My name is Quincy, but most people, including Vivian, call me Q. There is a tradition in our family that the firstborn in 4 generations is called Quincy. Since my uncle's passing, my parents call me Q. Vivian's parents are the only ones who do not adhere to this tradition. All the members of the Langer family, except John and Barbara, know me as Q. A year and a half after our first date, Vivian and I had a beautiful wedding, which surprised not only me but also my parents. The ceremony was conducted by a state judge, and among our guests was a United States Senator whom Vivian affectionately calls Uncle Isher. Before tying the knot, Vivian and I decided to wait until we were 30 before starting a family. In order to move up the career ladder and improve our financial situation, we decided to go to Chicago for the weekend shortly after her 30th birthday. In a hurry shortly before midnight, I packed 2 suitcases and put the most valuable things in the trunk of the car. I called my younger brother Bill, who agreed to let me stay at his place an hour away while I sorted things out. Both he and his wife promised to keep my whereabouts a secret, even if it meant hiding it from my wife. As my 30th birthday approached, I was preparing for a weekend trip to Chicago, wanting to relax and reflect on my career and finances. 2 weeks before the trip, I packed my things in 2 suitcases and loaded them into the trunk of my car at midnight. I contacted my younger brother Bill, who agreed to let me stay with him an hour away from home while I sorted out my life. Not knowing where Vivian was, who was most likely busy with her lover, I knew she would be sympathetic to my departure when we had to return home on Sunday morning. This thought haunted me that evening. I wondered what made Vivian seek solace elsewhere and why I allowed it. I wondered if I looked weak or submissive in her eyes, trying to satisfy her desires. She will soon realize how wrong she was. Saturday morning was spent on the usual financial chores that might seem trivial, canceling our shared credit cards and transferring half of the money to a new account in my name. It was unclear whether Vivian returned to our room on Saturday and found that I was missing, or whether she was not at home from Friday evening until Sunday morning. Anyway, the first message I received from her was at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. "Where are you?" "We have to leave at 11, she wrote. I showed the message to my brother, and we laughed while enjoying margaritas on his back porch. He got up to check how the sausages were frying for our brunch. Meanwhile, my wonderful daughter-in-law was in the kitchen making homemade potato salad. In difficult times, family comfort is really incomparable. Half an hour later, another message came with a similar reminder. After a rapid succession of increasingly desperate voicemails, her message at 10 o'clock became a reminder that there was no way she could get home despite the fact that I drove us there. The next voicemail was filled with anger and threats, followed by a plea for help as she tried to extend her stay at the hotel but could not do so due to her credit cards being canceled. This margarita was really amazing. My sister-in-law Sharon asked if there was any way to make peace with this stupid woman. She noted the strength of our marriage and my deep concern for her. I was ready to do anything for her, but the way she behaved in this situation made it clear that I was not the main priority in her life. Around 5 o'clock, my brother's phone rang while the 3 of us were still sitting on the back porch, having drunk several glasses of margaritas. He glanced at the caller ID and raised his eyebrows, silently inviting me to answer if I wanted to. I shook my head, indicating that I wasn't interested in the answer. Instead, he handed the phone to Sharon, who was noticeably more sober than my brother and me. "Hi Viv," she began. "I'm answering Bill's calls because he's a little drunk to do it on his own." "Yes, we are aware of what happened. We have no information about his current whereabouts," Sharon said. She then questioned Vivian's actions, expressing disbelief at how she could betray such a kind person. Vivian's response left much to be desired. Sharon rolled her eyes and made a face while talking on the phone. Sharon replied with a couple of vague confessions, after which she wished Vivian good luck and hung up the phone. Turning to me, Sharon insisted, "I gave you a head start. You owe me a favor. Did you even realize that you had a disagreement with her and then left without giving her a chance to explain everything? You're really insensitive, you know." "You're not buying this," I began. "No, I don't believe that, Q. I'm just telling you what she said and what she's probably telling others. Trying to find you," Sharon replied. "Damn," I muttered. "Can someone pour me another margarita?" Bill gladly agreed, once again showing why I consider him a great brother. I'd already drunk 8 margaritas. There was no chance that I would be able to become a member in the near future. Despite being hungover on Monday morning, I managed to get to work on time. Even though I wasn't dressed appropriately upon entering the boss's office, I quickly informed him of my decision to either quit or immediately move to another office. I told him everything, even mentioned my vague idea of temporarily disappearing. I hoped this would give me the opportunity to take a break from my wife, or rather from my domineering father-in-law who may spend some time looking for me, if at all. In addition to requesting a transfer, I also asked the boss to officially change my name to Oliver, my middle name, and to keep any information about me secret within the law. After the boss agreed on my next job, I went to the office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Half an hour later, Oliver Navarro was starting a new life, leaving behind old ties with Indiana and Bishop Enterprises. A week later, I started my duties in a 2-room apartment provided by the company for my new single life. So that my wife could not track my calls and bills, I decided to buy a new phone and change the provider. I shared the new number with only a few trusted people at home, not counting my parents. My brother informed me that my mother disapproved of my actions and seemed to support Vivian. I didn't want to face her judgment and risk her giving my number to Viv. Unfortunately, my father unwittingly found himself in the middle of this conflict. I knew that if I gave him my contact details, Mom would most likely convince him to share them, which would cause potential tension between us. That's why I decided not to involve him in this case. Fortunately, Bill and Sharon were reliable confidants, and I was sure that Mom would not be able to get my number from them, despite her persistent attempts. Vivian also tried to make contact, but according to Bill, it took her a week to realize that I was out of town. How can we build a relationship if we can't talk, if we can't solve problems? She asked Bill. Maybe he doesn't want to fix the situation, Viv. You really upset him in Chicago, Bill recalled his response to her. It's only been a couple of nights, Bill, she defended herself. Maybe not for you, but for him, it was everything, Bill replied. Over the next year, my career in Santa Fe continued to develop. I didn't really strive for a social life, but it was practically non-existent, and I was quite happy with it. From time to time, I asked Bill to clarify if I was legally married. To my surprise, Viv did not start the divorce process. I wondered why this happened. From time to time, I met with colleagues after work, but it wasn't until I lived in Santa Fe for about a year and a half that I finally went on a first date. Bob Cedar described her as a stunning woman with dark hair and mesmerizing eyes that radiated a certain attractiveness. She was of mixed ancestry, part Pueblo and part Hispanic, and her powerful legs were especially impressive, especially when we found ourselves in bed together. We crossed paths several times, but soon I realized that she was looking for a permanent relationship, and I couldn't offer it to her. 2 months later, I met Evangeline, known as the Born Angel, in my favorite cozy pub. Sitting at the bar, the woman exuded classic Irish charm with dark red hair, freckles, and bright blue eyes. It soon became clear that she also had a well-known Irish temper. I was still in my jacket and tie, tired from a busy day at work and sipping from a shot glass of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey. Suddenly, a woman's voice rang out, asserting, "The one at the bar is mine, girls. You'll find everything to your liking here." As a group of women entered, observing their clothes, I came to the conclusion that they had recently finished a shift at a nearby factory. They were all dressed in jeans and work shirts. The woman walking towards me had her shirt partially unbuttoned, showing off her revealing cleavage. I couldn't help but notice her gait and bouncing breasts. "What do you have for dinner tonight, Mr. Fancy Dresser?" she asked with a wide smile, her eyes sparkling. "Tennessee, dear. Do you like it?" I replied. Angel and I spent a wonderful evening chatting, dancing, and enjoying drinks. She shared that she rarely goes out, thanks to the nanny who looks after her 2-year-old child. With some embarrassment, she admitted that she did not know who the father of the child was. Unfortunately, I drank too much alcohol and was left alone, suspecting that I was drugged by 2 men with whom I was spending time at a party. This night has taught me some important lessons. My friends and I always make sure that we never leave the bar with a man unless we came with him. We all leave together, or at least in pairs, she said. But my daughter is a real blessing. She is the most important thing in my life. She took out her phone, tapped it a few times, and showed me a picture of a cute baby. "Do you have children?" she asked. "I don't see parenthood in my future," I replied, starting the story about my trip to Santa Fe. I talked about the difficult situation I found myself in. After listening to my story, the girl asked if I was still married to the woman in question and strongly advised me to deal with this issue. I admitted that I knew this was how it should be, but at that moment, I was more focused on leaving as soon as possible. In addition, there was the problem of communicating effectively with her. Angel and I started with a few one-on-one walks and then gradually introduced her daughter, Eleanor, to our adventures. Eleanor hesitated at first but eventually warmed to me when I knelt down and began to actively communicate with her. I had read about this approach, and whoever suggested it was truly brilliant. Angel quickly recognized me as her favorite, as Eleanor often sat on the floor while Angel and I cuddled on the couch. Eleanor crawled into my lap like a puppy and fell asleep, which not only impressed Angel but also brought me joy. Despite our deep understanding, the topic of exclusivity never arose between Angel and me. From the very beginning of our relationship, she openly said that she sometimes dated someone else. I knew that Angel and I didn't have any serious obligations, so I didn't mind her maintaining another relationship. But as they say, assumptions can be deceptive. I assumed that Bobby, the man in Angel's life, was a man. We never talked about Bobby, just as I assumed she didn't talk to him about me. But after about 3 months of our relationship, she accidentally started talking about how she had gone shopping with Bobby in a bikini a few days before, and then my assumptions turned out to be wrong. I interrupted her, surprised. Is Bobby a woman? It's spelled Bobby, not Bobby like Robert, Angel confirmed. Yes, that's right. Didn't I say that before? Bobby is a lesbian, and I'm bisexual. She paused, trying to remember if we had talked about this before. Are you sure we haven't discussed this? She avoided eye contact and clutched her hands convulsively. I silently shook my head, feeling caught off guard. Is this a problem for you, Olive? I've never thought about it before. Although I've known bisexuals, I've never met them. It took me a while to realize that the gender of the partner in our other relationship doesn't change anything in our dynamic. Do you think I should worry if she's really attractive? I asked, admitting that I usually find women visually more attractive than men. If a woman is exceptionally beautiful, I sometimes feel insecure compared to her. She's wonderful, she said in response. But my friend assured me that there was no need to worry. You both have unique qualities, she said with a laugh. And then, as if casually, she added, by the way, did I ever mention that I'm bisexual? I usually mention this at the beginning of a date to avoid misunderstandings or resentments. Does this mean that you'll be interested to know what we do when we're together? Are you that curious? She asked playfully. No, I never wanted to invade your privacy when I thought Bobby was a man, and the same thing is happening now that I know she's a woman. We're not in a serious relationship, and your personal life is yours as well as mine. So she's attractive, right? I pretended to be serious, but she saw right through me. Who do you think Eleanor likes best? I asked in a joking manner. Of course, you are, she replied with a smile. As a result, I became Eleanor's second assistant, getting permission to pick her up when Angel was late at work. I even installed a child car seat in my Mustang to ensure safety during our trips. When Bobby Clarkson's name popped up on my phone a few months later, I didn't immediately pick up the connection. Angel didn't tell me Bobby's last name, so when she called me, I realized something was wrong. When I picked up the phone, a feeling of anxiety settled in my stomach. Bobby was beside herself with excitement and broke the terrible news that Angel had been in a fatal car accident on her way home from work. Authorities contacted Bobby after they found Angel's phone, where she was mentioned several times in the call history. Bobby rushed to the hospital and found out that Angel had passed away. Overcome with grief, Bobby remembered that Eleanor needed to be picked up from the babysitter, and Angel allowed her to do it. We agreed to meet at Angel's apartment after I picked up Eleanor. Arriving at the apartment with a confused child, I found Bobby sitting in the kitchen and crying uncontrollably. She was hugging Eleanor tightly, and tears were streaming down her face. We hugged tightly for what seemed like an eternity, two adults and a confused toddler clinging to each other. After a while, we reluctantly let go of each other, realizing that we had to focus on the child's well-being and determine our next steps. Putting together the scraps of information about Angel's life, we realized that she was an orphan who had no living relatives. We had to take care of Eleanor until the appropriate authorities could be found to take care of her. Bobby and I bought some cans of tuna for sandwiches, and I found a pack of juice and chips to feed Eleanor. As we mourned our dead friend, we discussed what to do with Eleanor next. It dawned on us that according to the law, she belongs to the state and most likely will be transferred to a foster family. And this thought weighed on both of us. Despite the uncertainty, we decided that keeping Eleanor with us was the best choice for her, even if it wasn't the most logical decision. We agreed that Eleanor would stay with us for the time being and would not be placed in foster care. As long as the state doesn't know about her, it won't interfere and send her away. We were determined to ensure that Eleanor would not be overlooked. Bobby questioned my ability to raise a child, to which I admitted that I didn't know much, but I was once a child myself. Despite my lack of experience, I was ready to take care of Eleanor. "This is not exactly the comfort I was looking for," I said. Over the next hour, we discussed various options and worked out an action plan for Eleanor. As a result, we decided that I would give up my apartment, move in with Angel, and become the main caregiver for the child, with kindergarten providing additional support. Bobby agreed to help me regularly, even though neither of us had any experience with children. "Do you know the old saying?" she asked with a smirk. "The blind leads the blind." Her joke finally broke the tension in the room, and I giggled. "Actually, it's the blind leads the blind," I corrected her with a smile, "but your version is definitely funnier. By the way, I'm Oliver Navarro." "It's nice to officially meet you, Bobby," I said, holding out my hand for a handshake. She glanced briefly at my hand and then stepped forward to greet me without shaking hands. I hugged her sorrowfully, already feeling the weight of Angel's absence. "God, I'm going to miss her so much," she whispered. "Me too," was all I could say. The next morning, I called my boss and asked for a few personal days to deal with Angel's passing. Bobby and I decided to cremate Angel's body. It took Eleanor, Bobby, and me a while to get used to the new daily routine. Bobby came to the apartment almost every evening after work. We both took turns cooking, and it was clear why Eleanor liked her so much. She was smart, funny, and energetic, just like Angel. Angel was tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and had curves in all the right places. I loved spending time with her, and I missed her on the evenings when she didn't come. Bobby and I often talked about our feelings for Angel until late at night. 3 months later, Bobby finally plucked up the courage to talk to me one evening after putting Eleanor to bed. I was sitting on one end of the couch in the living room, and Bobby was standing next to me, casually crossing her legs, a move that most women do effortlessly but many men find difficult. "Yes," I replied, stretching the word, feeling a sense of anticipation. "Oliver, how would you like us to move into a bigger apartment, and I could move in with you permanently?" Bobby suggested. "It would be more practical for us to cooperate and take care of Eleanor together. I am very attached to the child and strive to become a mother to her. You could also play the role of a father. I know she is very dear to you too. We don't have to be married to raise a child. In fact, if we were both present in the family, it would allow us to maintain our own social lives. Since we are friends and not romantic partners, there should be less chance that we will break up, as happened with my wife." Despite Bobby's undeniable beauty, I didn't even think to take a step towards her because of her interest in women, which I respected. But I couldn't deny the strong feelings I had for her. Our mutual love for Eleanor brought us closer, and as a result, our friendship became even stronger. Our bond was based on a shared devotion to Eleanor, and the lack of romantic or intimate tension between us only strengthened our friendship. The three of us became like a close-knit family, especially when Eleanor started calling us Mom and Dad, a habit she picked up from other children in kindergarten. It's amazing how just 2 simple words can have such a profound effect on us adults. When Eleanor first called me Dad, my heart was filled with happiness, and when she called Bobby Mom, it seemed to touch Bobby deeply. When I was helping Eleanor tie her shoelaces, she looked up at me and said, "Thanks, Dad." I felt a lump form in my throat, and tears welled up in my eyes. I quickly retreated to the bathroom to clean myself up. A few minutes later, I came out with tears in my eyes but with a smile on my face. She playfully patted my hand, and I couldn't help but smile and nod. Despite the fact that Bobby and I never showed the typical affection of husband and wife, in the following years, we easily joined the company of Elon's parents, classmates, and acquaintances at social events. When asked, we admitted that we were not married and avoided talking about children. I was completely shocked when Vivian, yes, the same Vivian, showed up at our place on Saturday morning, for years after I broke off my relationship with her. "Oliver, someone's here for you," Bobby called from the living room while I was sitting at the kitchen table playing dice with Eleanor. Eleanor followed me into the living room, and I couldn't tell who was more surprised, me or Vivian. She is. Is she yours, Q? My wife asked, looking at Eleanor as if she had seen a ghost. I had to close my mouth to answer. Well, actually, she's ours, I said, pointing to Bobby and myself. Yours? She can't be yours. We're still married. It was obvious that Vivian was having a hard time figuring out the situation. She was on the verge of collapsing to the floor. I invited her to sit on our sofa, and she did so without delay. Relax, Viv, I said. Bobby and I may not be married, but Eleanor is still our daughter. Vivian let out a sigh of relief. Well, that's a little encouraging. We can work with that. What do you mean, Vivian? Why did you come back after all this time? Are we already divorced? I was shocked to learn that I was still legally married to Vivian. She had not taken any steps towards divorce, believing that I would return to her within a year. After almost 2 years of searching for me with her father, she finally plucked up the courage and asked me for reconciliation. Reconciliation? Why now? I replied hastily. 4 years was not enough for me to recover from the pain you caused and from your cruel behavior. Vivian expressed her deep love, saying that her whole life would not be enough to show it. She confessed that she had made a terrible mistake and apologized for trying to manipulate me with her actions. She explained that she thought by shocking me, she would force me to return, not realizing that I would leave only for a weekend affair, mistaking intimacy for love. Isn't the idea of starting a family and building a life together good enough to outweigh the temporary pleasure of a weekend fling? I thought you knew me better than anyone else, I replied. You knew about my firm beliefs and loyalty, but you chose to completely ignore them. I cannot accept such disrespect from anyone, not even from my beloved wife. Her eyes scanned the room briefly, lingering on Bobby and Eleanor. You seem to have recovered quickly, she remarked, as if nothing had changed. Your boss at home covered for you perfectly, even when you changed offices and started using your middle name. He kept telling Dad's investigators that Q no longer worked there. Dad had to get a court order to access Bishop's workbooks, and that's when he realized your middle name was Oliver. After that, all I had to do was pluck up the courage and come to you. Okay, you came to me, I replied. Despite all the past mistakes and shortcomings, I am grateful that I have a loving family that I would not trade for anything in the world. My partner is a wonderful woman whom I admire and trust completely. We are united by deep mutual respect, and we have a beautiful daughter whom we will always cherish as she grows up and becomes a wonderful woman. Together, we make a strong team, and I take great pleasure in being a part of it. As I once said, there is no I in team, and there is certainly no I in us. My words were uttered with passion, reaching almost to a scream. For the first time, Vivian showed genuine remorse. After a quick glance at Bobby and Eleanor, I went over to my loved ones, and we hugged tightly. It's going to be okay, my dear. Now I understand everything, Q, Vivian said softly, looking at us. I will file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment of marriage as soon as I return home. I don't need any financial support from you. I hope I'm not asking too much of your selfishness. I'll try my best, Q, but that's all I can guarantee. Maybe with time, before I could finish my sentence, Vivian got up from the couch, smiled faintly at me, and left the apartment forever, and possibly my life. Bobby sent Eleanor upstairs to play, and she sat next to me on the couch, our knees touching. I saw the same expression on Bobby's face as before. Did you really mean what you just said to your wife, that she asked. Absolutely, I confirmed. I know there are no romantic feelings between us, but I care about you. I completely trust and respect you, and I believe you also respect me. I can see that you care about both of us. In general, do you understand? I understand, she replied with a simple smile. Even after the divorce, I didn't want to return to the dating scene. Before marriage, I didn't attach much importance to this, but now that I have a family, it has become even less important. I still had fun from time to time, but finding a new partner wasn't my main focus. Bobby, on the other hand, was more active in dating and led a more intense social life. Despite our differences, we constantly communicated and informed each other about our acquaintances. Our daughter has always been our top priority. We had a rule of not bringing home dates, except for dinners. When Eleanor was about 11 years old, Bobby and I decided it was time to tell her the truth about our family. The night we planned to do this, we were both on edge. We'd been talking about this for almost a year. That evening, the three of us shed tears while looking at photos of Eleanor's biological mother and explaining her connection to Bobby and me. We also had to talk about Angel's bisexuality and Bobby's lesbianism. In addition, we had to justify our choice not to give Eleanor to the state but to educate her ourselves. We may not be blood relatives, but we are connected by love, Bobby concluded. Eleanor looked confused and worried as she digested the information we shared with her. She was an intelligent and perceptive child, and after a few days, it seemed that she understood and accepted our explanations. "Couldn't you just let the custody service pick me up? Wouldn't that be easier for both of you?" she asked over dinner. "Doing the right thing is not always easy," I replied. "I've never doubted my decision, except perhaps when you got sick and threw up on my new suit at your 6th birthday party. And I'm sure Mom didn't doubt it either." Bobby, who had tears in her eyes, nodded, wiping her nose with a napkin. Apart from our individual friendships, Bobby and I had created a strong bond as a couple. We met with friends from time to time. Bobby loved dancing, and occasionally, we would join in the fun. She was definitely a more skilled dancer than me, but I had to make an effort to keep up with her. Our friends, who knew we weren't a couple, often commented on how well we complemented each other on the dance floor. Although Bobby sometimes danced with other friends during our outings, she always politely declined invitations from unfamiliar men, for obvious reasons. Despite her charm, she never lacked attention from both sexes. However, when one such incident occurred after she returned to our table from dancing with our friend John, a younger man seemed offended by her refusal. "Come on, honey, I'm better than the guy you just danced with or the one you're sitting with," he insisted, grabbing her wrist and trying to pull her back onto the dance floor. Despite being slim, tall, and in decent shape at the age of 41, I couldn't just watch someone mistreat my friend. So, I took action. I grabbed the hand holding Bobby's wrist tightly, twisted it, causing the young man to cry out in pain, and then let Bobby go. But it was a serious mistake on his part. Freeing herself from his grip, Bobby quickly turned to him and delivered a precise knee strike. "Oh, did I mention that she played college football?" The young man fell to the floor, hitting his face on the table. When the bar manager and the bouncer came to our table, they found a young man curled up in a fetal position, his face covered in red liquid. The police were called, and after we testified, we were told that neither Bobby nor I would be charged. I was grateful for the help, but Al Clarkson's daughters had self-defense skills even before we started dating, regardless of who we were dating at the time. Tonight, Bobby commented on the young man's serious mistake. I suggested that the next time he and Mom come to visit Dad, he should teach Eleanor, because I liked his approach. After we moved into a 5-bedroom house a few years ago and renovated it, we now have, in fact, 2 bedrooms with bathrooms. Our spacious family room also has a built-in snack area, making our house a favorite gathering place for Eleanor and her friends. Bobby and I easily took on the responsibility of being surrogate parents for several teenagers, and to be honest, we both enjoyed it. I found out that Bobby had been in a relationship with the same woman for about 2 months when she invited her to join Eleanor and me for dinner on Saturday. It became clear to me that this woman held a special place in Bobby's heart when she confidently asked me to leave the kitchen and cooked her best dish, veal parmesan with spaghetti. Stephanie Ellis made an amazing first impression. Compared to Bobby, who scored 82 on the Nana, Stephanie easily scored 92 points thanks to her striking facial features, with big brown eyes, flawless porcelain complexion, curly shoulder-length dark brown hair, and a figure resembling a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. She was truly stunning. After Stephanie arrived, Eleanor whispered to me, "Dad, seriously, you should let Mom play matchmaker for you. She has a talent for it." "I couldn't agree more, sweetheart," I replied. Stephanie's charm lay not only in her appearance but also in her character, which I found very pleasant. Eleanor liked her quickly, and Bobby was just thrilled. The happiness in Bobby's eyes when Stephanie was around warmed my heart. It also awakened memories of my own past buried deep in my mind, which caused me a slight feeling of envy. It took Stephanie a while to get used to the close relationship between Bobby and me, but eventually, she adjusted. Bobby and I had a special bond because we were the joint parents of a child whom we had raised together since the age of 2, and our connection went beyond simple friendly communication. We shared everything with each other, from the mundane to the profound. I was surprised when Stephanie called me a few weeks after her regular visits and asked if we could have lunch together. She asked me to keep this information a secret from Bobby, and although I doubted it, I reluctantly agreed. 2 days later, I was sitting in a restaurant when Stephanie walked in, saw me, and came to my table. When she sat down, I couldn't help but notice the envy on the faces of some of the men around us, which made me giggle softly. It was a reminder that fantasies often surpass reality. After exchanging greetings and ordering food, Stephanie wasted no time and moved on to the main topic of conversation. She expressed her doubts about Bobby's relationship with me and her reluctance to enter into a relationship with someone who may already be committed. "Wow," I said, "if only that were true. Amazing women like Bobby don't usually date guys like me, even if she's not a lesbian. However, I'll take it as a compliment," I added. "But you're right." After spending an hour discussing family relationships, Stephanie began to understand and appreciate Bobby's role more deeply. By the time we parted ways later that night, Stephanie said, "All right, accept me into your ranks. It will be an honor for me to become a part of this family." 6 months later, Bobby and Stephanie got married. Having lost my father many years ago, I had the honor of escorting Bobby down the aisle on her wedding day. Among her bridesmaids was 15-year-old Eleanor, strikingly similar to her late mother with red hair and blue eyes. Watching Eleanor, I couldn't help but feel anxious about the role of a teenage girl's father in high school, which brought back memories of my own teenage years. Bobby and Stephanie later told me that I didn't handle the situation as gracefully as they had hoped. Bobby strongly objected to the idea of using physical threats against high school students who kissed his daughter, citing a previous incident when Eleanor was embarrassed on a date. "Did you see how embarrassed she was? You completely scared her," I protested. Stephanie agreed and added, "You won't be chaperoning her dates anymore." "Would you react the same way if I started dating women?" Eleanor asked. "Probably not, but then you'd have to deal with Mom and Stephanie." "It wouldn't be any easier for your friend," I replied. Eleanor paused, a mixture of emotions reflected on her face. "As much as I hate to admit it, it could be even worse," she agreed. I giggled, feeling relieved when she left. Few phrases strike fear into a man's heart like "we need to talk," but in my case, the situation was more confusing than alarming. When Bobby said those words on Friday night, Eleanor was out with friends, so she brought me to the formal living room usually used only for guests. Stephanie was already there and looked visibly nervous when I entered. She handed me a glass apparently filled with Angel's Envy rye and gestured to a cozy armchair with a padded back for me to sit in. Bobby and Stephanie were sitting on the couch, each holding a glass of white wine. I felt completely confused. "Do you understand me, ladies? I sincerely apologize for any mistakes I may have made, and I assure you they won't happen again," I said sincerely. "Never," I added firmly. The two women exchanged puzzled glances until Bobby finally understood the situation. "Calm down, Oliver. It's not what you're imagining, but let's keep this apology handy for any future mistakes, okay?" Bobby laughed. "I have a request for you," she continued cautiously. She looked at me, then swallowed nervously and tried to speak, but with difficulty. Finally, Stephanie intervened. "Is it possible? Can we borrow some of your seed, Oliver?" Stephanie said. There was an awkward silence in the room, and we all exchanged nervous glances. Excuse me?" I stuttered, feeling the full weight of the moment. "Oh, why is this so difficult?" Bobby muttered to herself. Finally, Bobby spoke, breaking the tension. "Stephanie and I talked and decided that we want to have a baby. We were wondering if you would like to help us with this," she said, and her words hung in the air. It took me a moment to realize what I had just been asked to do, and then a slow smile spread across my face. "This might be the biggest smile of my entire life," I exclaimed, causing a burst of laughter in the room as the two women jumped up and down next to me like cheerful schoolchildren. "Why did you choose me?" I asked. When the excitement subsided and we settled back into our seats, they looked at each other with wide smiles. "It may be hard to believe, but we chose you for your intelligence, charm, respectful attitude, good looks, and physical fitness," Bobby said. "You're a wonderful father and a wonderful person. We thought it would be great if our child inherited some of these wonderful qualities." I rarely cry, but that day was an exception. I cried like a newborn. "If you're interested, I can sell you my half of the house so you can." No, Bobby interrupted. "We really want you to stay with us. We were hoping you'd help us raise a child like we've raised Eleanor together. I think we've done a great job with her, don't you? I am very proud to be raising our daughter, and I really enjoyed this journey, although I was a little worried about Stephanie's thoughts." It turned out that she had already thought it all through. Stephanie noted that research shows children develop well if there is both a mother and a father in the household. Then she considered how a child with two mothers, a father, and a sister would develop. Before Eleanor left for college, through tears, I managed to express my gratitude. "I love you all so much," I sobbed. Later that evening over dinner, Eleanor and I shared our plans. Jumping up from her seat, she hugged Bobby and Stephanie tightly. "I can't believe I'm going to be an older sister. How incredible is that?" Eleanor exclaimed joyfully. 2 months later, Bobby, Eleanor, and I eagerly awaited Stephanie to come out of the bedroom to confirm her pregnancy. When she emerged with tears of joy, we all hugged together. Personally, my heart was filled with emotions. Remembering that just over 13 years ago, I couldn't have imagined I'd have the opportunity to become a parent again, I was on the verge of tears. The family, as I understood it, can take on different shapes and forms. I have always admired Eleanor for her intelligence and how she has matured over the years. She calmly coped with all the challenges in our family, even when teased by others. Despite potential obstacles, such as Bobby being a lesbian, Bobby and I not being married, and each of us having different last names, Eleanor rarely expressed dissatisfaction with the difficulties she faced. As our family expanded with new members and surnames, we decided to keep Eleanor's original surname as indicated on her birth certificate. Despite criticism from others, Eleanor was liked by her peers and often invited them to gatherings at our home, whether they were football friends or bandmates. While children were generally more inclusive, some adults were less accepting. Sometimes we heard rumors and gossip from adults, but the atmosphere usually calmed down, perhaps because few people wanted to challenge Bobby, known for her quick wit and fierce defense of our family. Eleanor placed second in her class and was chosen to deliver the graduation speech. Despite my verbal talents, when I offered to help her, she said I had already done enough and no longer needed assistance. Strangely, she never rehearsed her speech in front of me. I looked forward to hearing Eleanor's speech, but unfortunately, I had to wait. With Bobby and Stephanie on the day of graduation, when we entered the hall with Robert Alex Ellis, who was almost a year old, we were constantly stopped by women admiring the baby, which caused delays. Eleanor's speech was scheduled as the second address at the ceremony, and I couldn't help but chuckle when I saw its title, "I'm Not on the Team," printed in the program. Her speech focused on the power of teamwork to overcome personal flaws and emphasized the importance of working together. Using our family as an example, she demonstrated how our differences could create a strong and successful group. That day, I felt a deep sense of pride listening to her words. Eleanor's speech brought many to tears. The whole family went on a trip to Arizona State University to see Eleanor off for her freshman year of college. We left Santa Fe earlier than planned, which allowed us to enjoy some tourist attractions before bidding farewell to Eleanor. As we prepared to leave, we lined up to hug Eleanor one last time. Finding myself at the end of the line, I realized this order was intentional. "Dad, please promise me that you'll make more effort to find a good partner," she said when the others went to the car. In a low voice, she added, "I know finding a partner wasn't a priority for you while I was at home, but now that I'm gone, Mom has found a good partner. You deserve it too." "I'll try, but it's not easy to find someone like Stephanie," I replied. I was surprised when Robert started calling me Dad, and my heart filled with joy every time he said it. It surprised me that he called Bobby and Stephanie Mom, but they always knew who he was talking to, despite there being no noticeable difference in pronunciation. Both women always understood him perfectly. When Eleanor graduated from Arizona State University, she asked me to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, which was my main responsibility at that event. Bobby and Stephanie cheerfully and joyfully handled most of the important tasks. I mostly played a financial role and entertained my 7-year-old son, Robert. Although Jack Lacier seemed like a good guy to me, I firmly warned him not to offend my daughter. I promised I would only interfere in their marriage if Eleanor misbehaved. Jack seemed to understand, though his voice was strained, perhaps because I was holding him in a chokehold with one hand. Without hesitation, I felt it necessary to emphasize the importance of my actions as a father, despite already being in my 50s. I tried to keep fit by going to the gym 3 times a week. The wedding went great, and I appreciated every moment of this momentous day for my daughter. I tried to engage with guests at every table, enjoyed delicious food and drinks, and danced with many women. While chatting with friends, an energetic woman with silver-purple hair grabbed my arm and dragged me onto the dance floor. "Do you have any height requirements for your partner, stud?" she joked as we danced, eliciting laughter from our friends. "By the way, I'm Aunt Deb," she added when we settled down on the dance floor. She greeted me, "I'm Jack's mom's best friend. In the past, I even changed your new son-in-law's diapers from time to time," she said mischievously, mentioning her nephew's praise and a warning about my infamous chokehold. Flashing a flawless smile and bright blue eyes, she took my hand, and we started dancing. I couldn't help but admire her athletic physique, reminiscent of a gymnast's body. As the music filled the room, I noticed how gracefully she danced to lively melodies. When a slower song started playing, she closed the distance between us. "You must be working out a lot," Deb remarked as we walked hand in hand to the bar for a drink. I felt like she was marking her territory, and it didn't bother me. But if that was the case, she would have to get past Bobby and Stephanie, who were known as the American version of the Spanish Inquisition. I led her to our table and began to introduce her. I was relieved when my 2 best friends decided to give her some time before peppering her with questions. "I'll get you another drink," I said with a smile and stood up. Jack's mother approached me at the bar and looked over at Deb, who was sitting with Bobby and Stephanie with a satisfied look. "She seems to have a short temper, but I've heard the 3 of you take great care of each other," Mara Lasser commented. "Let's see how she handles all the questions." Having been instructed to wait a few minutes before returning, I followed it exactly. Mara took this opportunity to share some details about Deb's past. Deb was a little younger than me, 55 years old. She had been married for 15 years before discovering her husband's infidelity about 10 years ago. "Go on," Mara told me how Deb quickly figured out the situation, literally kicking her husband out the door. When I returned to the table 5 minutes later, I found 3 women laughing uncontrollably. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. I felt even more restless than when I left. 2-year-old Kayla Lasser was running around our large house with our 2 Labrador retrievers, and her laughter filled the rooms. Her parents sat at the kitchen table drinking iced tea, and 4 of her 6 grandparents joined them. Jack and Eleanor, who lived only 45 minutes away, often came to visit and spend time with us and our first granddaughter. Jack's parents, Marcia and Tom, admitted they were a little jealous of our frequent visits. To remedy the situation, we invited them to join us for Christmas week so all 6 grandparents and Robert could celebrate the holiday together. Marcia gladly accepted the invitation, especially since it meant reuniting with her best friend Deb, whom she hadn't seen since Deb and I got married and moved to Santa Fe. Tom needed a little more persuasion before agreeing to come with us. He admitted feeling uncomfortable around Bobby and Stephanie, acknowledging he had never had close relationships with lesbians before. "I trust them completely, Tom," I stressed. "They're just like any other married couple. Both of them are very charming." He admitted he had preconceived notions about lesbians, but I grinned and reassured him, "Trust me, they don't fit stereotypes. Don't worry about it, Tom. They're just women, probably with more shoes than both of us put together." Deb was the perfect wife I didn't even know I needed, energetic and dynamic. While I considered myself accommodating, Deb was always on the move, her vitality infectious. When she moved in with us in the spring, I had to prepare a garden for her, planting lots of salad vegetables. She watched the process, and I teased her, saying she looked like a cat known for its keen observation. Bobby and Stephanie quickly grew close to her, almost as emotionally attached as I was. Despite their warnings to protect me if she ever harmed me, she confessed to me the next day, looking shocked. "I'm sure they were serious, dear," I replied seriously. "We always support each other." "I'm sure they meant it seriously. I never want to hurt you, but if it happens, I won't linger. I'll disappear in an instant." She called it self-preservation. Deb convinced Marcia and Tom that Santa Fe was the perfect place to settle down, which they did. 8 years later, they retired a little earlier than expected when the house next door to ours became vacant. Tom was thrilled to learn that Bobby was one of the Premier League's cheerleaders. Bobby was a fan of Arsenal, and Tom was a devoted Crystal Palace fan. Their conversations were like chatting in an English pub during a match, especially when their teams were playing against each other. When we gathered to watch the match between Arsenal and Crystal Palace, it was not uncommon to hear harsh phrases like "off, you idiot," or "you lost, old man." We quickly realized that football fans, or as Americans call them, soccer fans, are much more passionate than baseball fans, as Deb, Stephanie, Mara, and I soon found out. Jack and Eleanor decided not to take their 3 grandchildren to the Arsenal and Crystal Palace match. It was a beautiful summer evening in Santa Fe, and I was relaxing on the swing on the porch of my house, savoring a glass of Jameson Black Barrel Irish whiskey and feeling grateful for my blessings. Suddenly, my eldest granddaughter appeared from the back door and sat down next to me, leaning her slender body against mine. I couldn't help but notice how much she looked like her late grandmother, dark red hair and bright blue eyes. "What are you thinking about, Grand?" she asked, using a special nickname she had come up with for me. "I was just thinking about my life and how lucky I was," I replied. "And how?" she asked curiously. After taking a sip of whiskey, I thought about how to explain to a 9-year-old girl. "Well, honey, I've often encountered situations where at first everything seemed bleak, but in the end, everything turned out well. It's like when I hurt my knee, but then Grandma Deb cheered me up with ice cream," my granddaughter Kayla shared, her eyes shining with newfound understanding. I couldn't help but smile at her, pleased that she was getting my feelings. "Yes, that's right," I confirmed, feeling grateful for her understanding. As it became known to me, my ex-wife Vivian never remarried after our divorce. Her happiness could not be influenced by her influential father. Her selfishness greatly impacted her life, and at the age of 51, she died of substance abuse, surrounded by 3 cats.